The Galactic Council chamber was a vast and imposing structure, its domed ceiling adorned with holographic constellations that shimmered like distant galaxies. Delegates from hundreds of species filled the chamber, their murmurs forming a dull, anxious hum. At the center of the grand hall stood the delegation, a proud and serpentine species known for their cruelty and cunning. Their leader, Ambassador, stood tall in his ceremonial robes, his eyes glinting with arrogance as he addressed the gathered council. In his clawed hand, he held a small, crystalline vial filled with a liquid that pulsed with an eerie, violet glow. Esteemed members of the council, hissed, his voice silken yet filled with menace, today, I present to you a marvel of ingenuity. This is venom, the deadliest poison ever created. Its effect is absolute. No species has survived its touch. It is the pinnacle of biochemical warfare, a tool of ultimate control. A murmur rippled through the chamber. They were known for their biological weapons, but this claim was bold even for them. Some delegates leaned forward in curiosity, while others recoiled in unease. To demonstrate, continued, gesturing with a flick of his clawed fingers, we have prepared a live subject. A pair of guards dragged a towering reptilian warrior into the chamber, his muscular form restrained by glowing energy shackles. The captive was of the species, renowned for their durability, their resilience in battle and matched by most. His yellow eyes burned with fury, but even he could not break free. One of the guards forced his mouth open while the other tipped a single drop of the shimmering liquid onto his tongue. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the warrior's body convulsed violently. His veins darkened as the poison spread through his system, his breathing turning ragged before it stopped entirely. Within seconds, he collapsed to the floor, lifeless. The chamber fell into silence. Let the weight of the moment settle before speaking again. His voice smug. As you can see, resistance is futile. This venom will render any enemy powerless before the might of the Dominion. The silence stretched, filled only by the quiet whirring of machinery and the distant hum of energy fields. Then, from the back of the chamber, a slow clap echoed. All eyes turned toward the seers. A human stood, arms crossed, an amused smirk playing at the corners of his lips. He was rugged, dressed in a jacket that looked like it had seen more battles than peace stacks. His scruffy beard and sharp blue eyes gave him an air of careless confidence, the kind that incited those used to fear and subservience. He stepped forward, his boots clicking against the smooth floor as he entered the circle of light where stood. Impressive, the human said, his voice laced with sarcasm. Really, it is. But I've got one question. Turned his cold gaze toward the human, irritated by the interruption. And who exactly are you? The human grinned. Name's Jack Carter. Just a simple guy from Earth. He gestured lazily toward the vial in hand. Mind if I give that a try? A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. Some of the delegates exchanged incredulous glances, while others muttered in disbelief. Eyes narrowed. You wish to test the venom on yourself? Jack shrugged. Why not? If it's really as deadly as you claim, it should drop me in seconds, right? The ambassador sneered. Humans may be reckless, but even you must realize the folly of this. Jack merely held out his hand, palm up. Give it here. A tense silence followed. Hesitated. Was this human mad? Or was this a trick? The council watched with bated breath, waiting for his decision. Then, with a flicker of amusement at the thought of watching the arrogant human crumble, handed him the vial. Jack took it with a smirk, popped the tiny stopper, and sniffed it. Ha! Smells kinda like cheap tequila. Before anyone could stop him, he tilted his head back and downed the entire vial in one gulp. The chamber erupted in shouts of horror and disbelief. Some delegates recoiled as if expecting Jack to collapse instantly, while others stared in morbid fascination. Himself took a step back, his forked tongue flickering in confusion. Jack smacked his lips and exhaled. Phew! That's got a bit of a kick. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. You sure this is the deadliest poison you've got? Because I've had spicier wings back home. Dead silence. The ambassador's expression twisted into something unreadable. He turned to his scientists, who were frantically scanning Jack with handheld. Their instruments beeped, flashed warnings, but Jack remained standing, completely unaffected. This is impossible, rasped, his voice devoid of its earlier confidence. Jack just grinned and clapped him on the shoulder. Guess you guys don't know much about human biology, huh? See, our livers are pretty damn good at filtering out toxins. And we kinda do this thing called drinking for fun. Builds up a nice little resistance. The realization dawned across the chamber like a storm. If humans could resist the deadliest poison in the galaxy, what else could they survive? What other horrors had they endured that no other species could? The power dynamic had just shifted, and the council knew it. Jack stretched, rolling his shoulders. Well, this was fun. Next time, bring something stronger. With that, he turned on his heel and strode toward the exit, leaving a stunned and terrified Galactic Council in his wake. The chamber was still buzzing with shock long after Jack Carter had swaggered out. The Galactic Council had witnessed something unprecedented, something that shattered the fragile balance of power that had long been maintained. A human, an ordinary human, had downed the most lethal venom in the galaxy and walked away without so much as a cough. The implications were terrifying. Across the West Chamber, representatives from countless species whispered in hushed, urgent tones. Some argued in disbelief, others in barely contained panic. The delegation, once smug and arrogant, now stood frozen, their expressions a mixture of rage and confusion. Supreme Chancellor, a towering from the collective, slammed a heavy claw against the council table, demanding silence. We must address this immediately, he rasped, his mandibles clicking in agitation. If humans possess such unnatural resilience, it changes everything. Ambassador, his tail coiled tightly around his chair in frustration, was still staring at the vial in his clawed hand. It is not possible, he hissed under his breath, his voice devoid of its earlier smugness. No species can survive venom. It was engineered to kill at the cellular level. He turned sharply to his scientists. Explain this. One of the biochemists, his scales a duller shade of green than his superiors, hesitated before speaking. We have reviewed the scans, he said cautiously. The human's metabolism appears to have neutralized the venom before it could take effect. It is likely that their species possesses an unusually advanced filtration system in their liver, possibly evolved from prolonged exposure to environmental toxins. Another was, this time from the delegate, an avian creature with sleek crimson feathers, cut through the room. You mean to tell us that humans are immune to biochemical warfare? Bared his fangs. No, that is absurd. But there was doubt in his eyes. A representative from the Dominion, their crystalline skin refracting the dim chamber lights, leaned forward. Not immune, perhaps, but resistant. And that resistance could make them the most dangerous force in the galaxy. A heavy silence settled over the chamber. The Galactic Council had long viewed humanity as an anomaly, primitive in many ways, reckless and predictable. Yet, they had survived wars that should have wiped them out, had expanded into the stars despite lacking the genetic advantages of other species. And now this? A casual defiance of one of the deadliest biological weapons in existence? It was a disturbing revelation. We need to act, Chancellor declared. If humans possess this resistance, it is only a matter of time before they become a threat to every empire represented here. We must ensure that their kind does not disrupt the aerodon of the galaxy. From the far end of the chamber, a slow, deliberate chuckle echoed. It was deep, guttural, carrying the weight of amusement but also something darker, something dangerous. All eyes turned to the Seors. A second human had been sitting in the shadows, legs kicked up on the table, arms crossed behind his head. He was older than Jack Carter, his face lined with experience, his graying hair cropped short. His uniform bore no official insignia, but those who had dealt with humans before recognized the cut of military fabric. Disrupt the aerodon of the galaxy. Steele mused, his voice casual yet filled with an underlying menace. That's rich. Considering humans weren't even invited to the party until a few decades ago. He leaned forward, placing his hands on the table, his piercing eyes scanning the room like a predator sizing up prey. Tell me something, Chancellor. Are you afraid? The Leden's mandibles twitched. We are being cautious. Steele chuckled again. Cautious. Right. He gestured toward the delegation. You lot tried to show off your fancy poison, thinking it'd prove how superior you are. Didn't quite work out, did it? His eyes gleamed with amusement. Now you're scrambling, wondering what other surprises humanity has up its sleeve. He leaned back again, stretching lazily. I'll save you the trouble. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. The chamber was tense, the power dynamic shifting like tectonic plates beneath their feet. The delegate's feathers flared. You act as if this is amusing, General Steele. But if what we witnessed today is true, it means humanity is far more dangerous than we previously thought. Steele shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe we're just really good at surviving. He let the words settle before continuing. Thing is, you're all worried about what this means for the balance of power. You're worried that if we can survive something like Venom, we might have other advantages you don't know about. He smirked. The representative's Christian body pulsed faintly as they spoke. Are you implying that humanity has been keeping secrets from the Council? Steele's expression remained unreadable. I'm saying that every species has skeletons in their closet. You all assume humans are weak because we don't have natural claws, fangs, or psychic abilities. But what we do have is adaptability. And history has shown that's the most dangerous trait of all. Chancellor, mandibles clicked. Are you threatening the Council? Steele grinned. Not at all. Just making an observation. Still fuming, slammed a closed fist on the table. This is unacceptable. Humans have deceived us. We must act before they gain further advantage. Steele's smile didn't fade. You could try, he said, was smooth. But let me remind you of something. Humans don't start wars. His expression turned cold, predatory. We finish them. The tension in the room became suffocating. The Galactic Council, once so sure of its power, now faced the unsettling reality that humanity was not just another species to be controlled. They were something else entirely, something unpredictable, something terrifying. As Steele stood and adjusted his coat, he gave one final glance around the chamber. Might wanna rethink underestimating us, he said with a smirk. Wouldn't want history to repeat itself. With that, he turned and walked out, leaving the council in stunned silence. The air in the council chamber was thick with tension, the weight of the previous discussions pressing down like an impending storm. The delegates sat rigid in their seats, their eyes shifting between each other as they struggled to process the revelation humanity had just thrown at them. They had long assumed that humans were a lesser species, intelligent, sure, but lacking the biological or technological advantages that many of the olden, more established empires wielded. That illusion had shattered the moment Jack Carter had downed a vial of lethal poison and walked away. The confidence the Council had in their dominance was crumbling before their eyes, and at the heart of it stood General Marcus Steele, a living embodiment of humanity's defiance. Steele leaned forward, his fingers tapping idly against the polished metal of the council table, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched, filled only by the flickering hum of holographic displays. Then, in a voice calm but firm, he finally spoke. Let's get one thing straight. Humanity isn't looking for a fight. But if you're asking whether we're going to roll over and let you dictate how we live, you're asking the wrong question. The ambassador bared his fangs, his voice a low hiss. You expect us to believe that this, he gestured sharply to the data hovering before him, still displaying the biochemical analysis of Carter's impossible survival. was not unintentional deception. Steele smirked, but there was little humor in it. Deception? That's rich, coming from the same people who tried to kill one of ours just to make a point. His gaze swept across the room, lingering on each delegation in turn. Tell me something. Was the plan to intimidate us? Make an example out of a single human so that Earth falls in line? If so, I gotta say bad move. The Chancellor clicked his mandibles, attempting to regain control of the discussion. The Council never authorized such an action, he declared, though his tone lacked its usual authority. The challenge was a miscalculation by the delegation. However, the consequences of what we have learned today must be discussed rationally. Rationally? Steele repeated, raising an eyebrow. Oh, now you want to be rational. He shook his head, exhaling sharply. Let me break it down for you. What you just witnessed was a human doing what we do best, adapting, overcoming, surviving. You lot think in terms of static power. You see claws, fangs, psychic abilities, and you think that's what makes a species strong. His expression hardened. Humans don't play by those rules. We don't rely on natural weapons. We create them. We don't have innate defenses, we build them. And when the universe throws something at us meant to kill us, he gestured toward the data hovering above the table. Well, we figure out how to live through it. A tense silence followed, broken only by the quiet hum of holographic projections flickering above the table. The representative, their crystalline form shimmering faintly, finally spoke. If humanity possesses such resilience, then it presents a fundamental shift in power across the galaxy. It is no longer a question of biology or strength of arms. It is a question of what else you have hidden from us. Steele chuckled, shaking his head. You all keep acting like this is some big conspiracy. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. You think we planned this? That we somehow engineered our own biology to counter your poison? Hate to break it to you, but sometimes the universe doesn't work in your favor. Sometimes, the underdog bites back. Tail flicked sharply in irritation. That remains to be seen. His voice was laced with poorly concealed hostility. The Council cannot ignore the threat this presents. Humanity's resistance to biochemical attacks is an advantage no other species has. If left unchecked, this could lead to destabilization of the established order. Steele's expression darkened. Destabilization. His voice dropped to a dangerous level. You mean the order where every major species gets to decide how we live? The order where we're expected to be grateful for whatever scraps of power you allow us. He shook his head. Nah. That order was never built to last. The tension in the room climbed to suffocating levels. The truth was evident. Humanity had always been seen as an afterthought, an upstart species barely worthy of a seat at the table. But today the Council had been forced to acknowledge something they never considered before. Humans were more than just survivors. They were. Chancellor clicked his mandibles again, his voice carefully measured. This discussion is not about control. It is about stability. The revelation of human resistance to biochemical weapons demands action. The Council must decide how to proceed. Steele tilted his head slightly, considering his words. Funny thing about deciding how to proceed. He stood up, adjusting his uniform. You act like you still have a choice. He turned to leave, but paused just before reaching the exit. Looking back, his voice carried the weight of unspoken warnings. You tried to poison a human. Didn't work. Now you're all scared of what else you don't know about us. His eyes flickered with something dangerous, something almost amused. If I were you, I'd start worrying about what happens if you try something worse. With that, he strode out, leaving behind a council chamber filled with uncertainty, fear, and the unmistakable sense that the balance of power had just shifted in humanity's favor. His council chamber was quieter than it had been in decades. The air was heavy, thick with the weight of unspoken fears and shattered assumptions. Delegates from every major species sat in rigid silence, their usual confidence eroded by the revelations of the past few days. At the center of it all, standing with an almost unsettling calm, was General Marcus Steele, his eyes scanning the assembled legions with a quiet, measured intensity. The battle had already been won, but the war for control of the galactic narrative had just begun. Supreme Chancellor, ever the diplomat, cleared his throat, the clicking of his mandibles betraying his unease. General Steele, he began carefully, the Council has deliberated extensively on the unforeseen developments regarding humanity's biological resilience. We acknowledge that miscalculations were made, and we regret the incident that transpired during our last assembly. Steele leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the smooth metal of the council table. Regret. His voice was smooth, almost amused. Regret that you tried to poison one of my men? Or regret that it didn't work? A ripple of discomfort passed through the room. The delegate bared his fangs, his long tail flicking against the floor in agitation. This is not a matter to be reduced to petty accusations, he hissed. The stability of the galactic order is at stake. Humanity's unexpected resistance to biochemical agents poses a significant threat to established military doctrines. Such an imbalance cannot be ignored. Steele let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. You lot are something else, he muttered. First, you try to wipe us out in a diplomatic test. Now, when that fails, you're worried that we're the threat. His expression hardened. You don't get to play the victim here. You took a shot at us, and you missed. Now you're scared of what happens next. The envoy, a towering figure wrapped in shimmering diplomatic robes, raised a delicate claw. General Steele, the concern is not fear but pragmatism. Humanity's presence in the galactic sphere was tolerated because we believed you lacked the fundamental attributes necessary to disrupt the status quo. This revelation changes everything. Steele smirked. Tolerated, he repeated. That's a nice way of saying you kept us around because you thought we weren't worth worrying about. I hate to break it to you, but humanity never needed your permission to exist. The representative, a being composed of shifting crystalline plates, inclined its head. Perhaps not. But your kind must understand that the Council exists to ensure balance. We cannot allow a sudden and unchecked rise in power to destabilize centuries of carefully maintained peace. Steele folded his arms, his stance unyielding. Peace, he echoed. Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot more like control. His voice dropped slightly, taking on a dangerous edge. You see, I've been thinking about this for a while. Humanity's been playing by your rules, trying to earn a seat at the table. But let's be honest, this was never about peace. This was about keeping us in check, making sure we never got too strong, too independent. His gaze swept the room. Well, guess what? You failed. The room fell into uneasy silence. For the first time in the history of the Council, an unaligned species had openly challenged their authority, and worse, they had the strength to back it up. Still seething, hissed, so what now? Do you expect the Council to simply stand by while humanity amasses power unchecked? Steele's smirk faded, replaced by a look of measured patience, as though he were addressing a particularly slow student. No, he said simply. I expect you to think long and hard before you try something stupid again. His fingers tapped against the table. Let me lay it out for you. Humanity isn't here to take over. We're not interested in ruling the galaxy. But if you come after us again, if you even think about trying to put us in our place, you're going to find out exactly how adaptable we can be. Steepled his clawed fingers, his mandibles clicking in thought. And what would you propose, General Steele? If humanity no longer considers itself subject to the Council's authority, then what future do you envision for our relations? Steele's eyes gleamed with something sharp, something dangerous. Simple, he said. A future where you don't make the mistake of underestimating us again. He straightened, pushing back from the table. I'm not here to negotiate humanity's right to exist. That ship has sailed. What happens next is up to you. But if you want my advice. He turned toward the chamber doors, pausing just long enough to deliver one last parting shot. Start treating us like equals. Because whether you like it or not, that's exactly what we are. With that, he strode out of the council chamber, leaving behind a room full of uneasy, shaken leaders who were only now beginning to understand the truth. Humanity wasn't just another species to be managed. They were something new, something unpredictable, something dangerous. And the galaxy would never be the same again.